Hey guys, tonight we begin with the jewel of the 19th century, the heart of a global empire, a city of unprecedented wealth, innovation, and culture, London. But we're not here to talk about the Crystal Palace or the marvels of the Industrial Revolution. We're going to talk about the reality for the overwhelming majority of people who live there, a reality of filth, grime, and unrelenting squalor. Let's be clear. The romanticized vision you have of Victorian London with charming gaslit streets and witty detectives is mostly a fantasy. For most, it was a daily struggle for survival in one of the foulest environments imaginable. You probably wouldn't last a single day. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And let me know in the comments what grim historical topic you'd like to explore next. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1850. It's 4 in the morning, and the first thing you're aware of isn't the light, because there is none. It's the smell. A potent, complex bouquet that would make a modern sewer seem like a perfume counter. It's the smell of unwashed bodies. There are 8 of them crammed into this 10 by 12-foot room with you. All family members, or maybe just strangers renting a corner of the floor. It's the smell of stale beer and gin seeping from the very walls, the smell of damp coal smoke that never quite leaves, and underneath it all, the pervasive, foundational odor of human waste. Forget your memory foam mattress and your high thread count sheets. You've spent the night on a pile of straw and rags on the floor, if you're lucky. You can feel the dampness seeping through your thin clothes from the packed earth beneath the floorboards. The floor is either wet or crusty. There is no in-between. As your eyes adjust, you see nothing but shadows. The single, grimy window is caked with so much filth, it barely admits the pre-dawn gloom. Privacy? What's that? Your concept of a personal bubble has violently popped. The person next to you, your neighbor Agnes, is coughing a deep, rattling cough that speaks of consumption, a disease that's slowly turning her lungs to liquid. You can feel the vibration of it through the floorboards. It's the Victorian version of an alarm clock, a constant reminder that death is not a distant concept, but a roommate, a very loud and inconsiderate roommate. Your body aches in ways you didn't know it could. The cold has settled deep into your bones, and every muscle protests as you try to sit up. The air is thick. You can practically chew it. It's a mixture of coal dust, fog, and whatever delightful pathogens your 7 roommates have decided to exhale overnight. This isn't a rough start to your day. This is the absolute peak of comfort and serenity you will experience for the next 16 to 18 hours. It only goes downhill from here. Welcome to your new home, a tenement in the heart of a London rookery, a sprawling slum that the city's wealthy would rather pretend doesn't exist. There's no running water, no toilet, no escape. Congratulations, you've survived the night, a feat not to be underestimated. Now the real challenges begin, and you're already starting the day dehydrated, tired, and breathing in tuberculosis spores. Sounds fun, right? Wrong. Now that you're awake, it's time for your morning routine, a ritual of self-care to prepare you for the day ahead. Except every single part of that sentence is a lie. There is no routine, there is no care, and the only thing you're preparing for is misery. Your first order of business is to relieve yourself, but you can't just stumble down the hall to a clean porcelain throne. You don't have a hall, and you certainly don't have a throne. Your options are grimly limited. Option 1 is the chamber pot, a simple bucket you share with everyone else in the room. It's currently full, brimming with the collected waste of 8 people from the previous night. Someone's job, usually a child's, is to empty it. Where, you ask? Simple, out the window. It's a common practice known as gardy-loo, a phrase shouted as a perfunctory warning to anyone unlucky enough to be walking below. The streets are the toilet. It's a charming system of community-based sanitation if your community is a swarm of flies. But let's say your building is a bit more upmarket It has a dedicated facility, a privy. It's located in the cellar or a small yard out back, a magnificent hole in the ground shared by the 50 or so other residents of your building. The queue in the morning is a social event, a desperate gathering of shivering people clenching their muscles in the damp morning air. When it's finally your turn, you enter a small, rickety shed that leans tiredly to one side. The smell hits you like a physical blow. It's the concentrated essence of all the misery in the building, a smell so powerful it has weight and texture. Below you is the cesspool, a brick-lined pit that is supposed to be emptied periodically by men called night soil men. Supposed to be is the key phrase here. The landlord, trying to save a few shillings, probably hasn't paid for it to be emptied in months. The pit is overflowing, a stagnant lake of human effluent that leaks into the surrounding ground, poisoning the very earth your building stands on. This is a critical detail because your water supply, your only source for drinking, cooking, and what little washing you might attempt, comes from a communal pump in that same yard. The pump draws water directly from the ground, the same ground that is being saturated with the contents of the overflowing cesspit. You are, quite literally, drinking your own and your neighbor's filth. This is the invisible enemy, the secret killer of Victorian London, the contaminated water that carries with it the dreaded cholera and typhoid. You don't know about germ theory yet. That's a problem for the future. Right now, the prevailing wisdom is that disease is spread by miasma, or bad smells. Given the state of your privy, it's an understandable conclusion, but a tragically wrong one. As for brushing your teeth, forget it. A toothbrush is a luxury you can't afford, and even if you had one, would you dip it into the same contaminated water? You might rinse your mouth with a sip of stale water, or just scrape the grime off with a finger. Personal hygiene is a battle you have already lost. You might wipe your face with a damp rag, but you're just moving the dirt around. You are caked in a thin film of grease, soot, and grime that will be your constant companion. It's your skin's defensive layer, a second epidermis made of pure London. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a puddle of something unidentifiable. A stranger with sunken eyes and pale skin stares back. You're ready for the day, or at least as ready as you'll ever be. Now you just have to figure out what you're going to eat, and if that will kill you before the cholera does. Feeling a bit peckish after that refreshing morning experience? Let's talk breakfast. You're probably picturing a hearty English breakfast, right? Some bacon, some eggs, a bit of toast. Wrong. That kind of meal is for the gentry, for the people who live in a different universe on the other side of town. For you, breakfast is whatever you can afford and whatever won't kill you immediately, though the odds are frankly 50-50 on that second point. Welcome to the wild world of Victorian food adulteration, a systematic poisoning of the poor for profit. Think of it as a citywide science experiment where you are the lab rat, and the hypothesis is, how much chalk can a person ingest before their digestive system shuts down entirely? Let's start with the basics. Milk. That white liquid you might add to your tea or use to make a bit of watery porridge is not what it seems. Milk is commonly thinned with water, often the same contaminated water from the local pump, to increase the volume. Then chalk or plaster of Paris is added to restore its white color and thickness. So you're getting a nice dose of calcium carbonate with your cholera. Congratulations, your bones might be strong as you lie on your deathbed. Your morning cup of tea, a staple of British life, is no better. Tea leaves were often bulked out with anything from dust and sand to sheep's dung to give them weight. To restore the color, they were sometimes dyed with copper carbonate or even lead, a fun little neurotoxin to get your brain firing on all cylinders in the morning. Nothing like a bit of heavy metal poisoning to start the day with a bang, or more accurately, a slow, agonizing decline into madness. Bread, the so-called staff of life, is more like the staff of death. Bakers were notorious for using alum, a chemical whitener, to make bread from low-quality flour look appealingly white. It made the bread heavier too, so they could sell less for more. Alum has the unfortunate side effect of causing severe gastrointestinal issues. But hey, the loaf looks nice, doesn't it? And it's not just the big items. The sugar you might want to put in your poison tea is often cut with sand or dust. The pepper you use to season your, well, whatever gruel you're eating is mixed with floor sweepings. The pickles get their vibrant green color from a splash of copper sulfate, a potent fungicide and herbicide. The sweets that children might buy from a street vendor for a farthing are brightly colored with pigments containing arsenic and lead. It's a chemical cocktail, a culinary minefield. Eating is a gamble every single time. The people selling you this food aren't necessarily evil. They're just desperate, caught in the same system as you. The baker needs to stretch his flour to make a profit. The milkman needs to make his rounds pay. But the result is a population slowly being sickened by its own food supply. The Lancet, a medical journal of the time, famously ran investigations exposing these practices, but for you on the ground, it changes nothing. You buy from the local costermonger or corner shop, and you get what you're given. So what is actually on your plate this morning? If you're lucky, it's a piece of that alum-laced bread and some of that lead-infused tea. Or maybe just a bowl of thin oatmeal called gruel, a watery, tasteless slop that provides just enough energy to get you to your grueling job. But don't worry about the long-term effects of ingesting chemicals and heavy metals. You have more immediate concerns, like the 13-hour workday you're about to endure. The slow poisoning from your food is a race against the fast poisoning from disease and the immediate danger of your workplace. Which one will get you first? It's the most exciting lottery in London, and you have a ticket every single day. With your stomach full of lies and chemicals, it's time to head to work. The commute in a modern city can be a drag, a crowded train, or a traffic jam. In Victorian London, the commute is a full-contact sport played in a sea of filth and danger. Let's take a walk. You step out of your tenement building and are immediately plunged into a world of overwhelming sensory input. The street, or more accurately the alley, is narrow and winding, unpaved and covered in a thick layer of greasy mud. It's not just mud, of course. It's a unique London cocktail of dirt, animal dung, food scraps, and whatever was thrown out of the windows above, including the contents of your chamber pot from an hour ago. The smell is staggering, a physical presence that coats the back of your throat. The air is thick with coal smoke from thousands of chimneys, creating the infamous pea super fogs, dense yellow-black smogs that could descend for days, reducing visibility to a few feet and making breathing a conscious effort. These fogs weren't just inconvenient, they were deadly, the sulfurous air exacerbating respiratory illnesses like bronchitis and consumption. You pull your thin coat tighter and begin to navigate the chaos. The streets are a river of humanity, a jostling, frantic crowd, all moving with a desperate energy. There are no traffic laws, no sidewalks, no personal space. You are shoved and elbowed by factory workers heading to the mills, by ragged children darting through legs, and by costermongers pushing their carts and shouting their wares. You have to watch where you step, not just to avoid the worst of the muck, but to avoid the pure finders, people who sift through dog excrement looking for pure, or dog dung, which was valuable for its use in the leather tanning process. It's a legitimate job, one of the many grim ways people scraped a living from the city's waste. And then there is the horse problem. Before cars, the engine of the city was the horse, pulling carriages, omnibuses, and carts. There were tens of thousands of them, and each horse produces between 15 and 35 pounds of manure per day. Do the math. The streets were literally drowning in it. On a dry day, it would turn to dust and blow into your face and lungs. On a wet day, it became a vast, stinking, liquid mire. To get from one side of a major street to the other, you might hire a crossing sweeper, a child who, for a half penny, would sweep a temporary path for you through the filth. It was a city built on a foundation of excrement. The noise is relentless. The clatter of iron-shod wheels on cobblestones, the shouting of vendors, the rumble of distant machinery. the constant hacking coughs of the crowd, and the cries of street urchins, or Arabs as they were sometimes called, children abandoned or orphaned, living by their wits, selling matches or stealing what they could to survive. They are a constant reminder of what happens when you fall through the cracks in this society, which are less like cracks and more like gaping chasms. Your commute is a journey through the digestive system of a diseased beast. You are a piece of undigested food being pushed along through its grimy guts. Every corner holds a potential threat: a pickpocket, a drunken brawler, a collapsing building. You arrive at your destination, the factory gates or the sweatshop door, not refreshed and ready for work, but exhausted and dirtier than when you left home. Your working day hasn't even begun, and you've already survived more hazards than a modern person might face in a year. And the worst part? This is normal. This is just Tuesday. The relentless grind of it all is what truly wears you down. The knowledge that tomorrow will be exactly the same, a repeat performance of the same filthy, dangerous journey. You've made it to the factory, your sanctuary of labor for the next 13 hours. This isn't an office with ergonomic chairs and filtered water. This is a brick box filled with noise, danger, and despair. The moment you walk through the door, the sound hits you. A deafening roar of machinery. Steam-powered looms clash and shudder, gears grind and shriek, and the entire building vibrates with the relentless rhythm of production. It's a sound that gets into your bones, a constant tremor that will stay with you long after you've left. The air is just as bad. It's thick with cotton dust, or metal filings, or chemical fumes, depending on your particular brand of industrial hell. You breathe it in with every gulp of air, and you can feel it coating your lungs. It's why so many of your fellow workers have that same persistent cough, the one you heard from Agnes this morning. It's the sound of their bodies slowly surrendering to the environment. Your boss is the foreman, a man whose own survival depends on how much work he can extract from you. He is not your friend. He is not your mentor. He is your warden. He stalks the factory floor, a tyrant in his small kingdom, quick to hand out fines for being a minute late, for talking, or for making a mistake. Fines that will be docked from your already pitiful wages. Your job is repetitive, mind-numbing, and incredibly dangerous. You might be a piecer in a cotton mill, a child who has to crawl under the moving machinery to repair broken threads, where a moment's hesitation could mean losing a finger, a hand, or your life. Or perhaps you work in a match factory, where you're exposed to white phosphorus, which causes the horrifying condition known as phossy jaw, an industrial disease that literally causes the bone in your jaw to rot away, glow a faint green in the dark, and eventually require surgical removal without anesthetic. Safety regulations? What are those? There are no guards on the machines, no ventilation systems, no protective equipment. Your only safety feature is your own vigilance, a vigilance that is hard to maintain 12 hours into a shift when exhaustion has dulled your senses to a stupor. You see accidents happen every day. A worker's hair caught in a belt, pulling them into the machine. A hand crushed in a press. A fall from a high scaffold. There is no workers' compensation, no disability insurance. If you get hurt and can no longer work, you are simply replaced. There is a line of desperate people outside the gates waiting to take your spot. The hours are long, stretching from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., with maybe a short break for a midday meal of that same adulterated bread and weak tea. You eat at your station, surrounded by the same noise and filth. You are a component of the machine, a human cog whose only purpose is to keep the wheels of industry turning. You are paid a pittance, barely enough to cover the rent on your squalid room and your poisonous food. You are trapped in a cycle of poverty, working yourself to death just to afford a place to collapse from exhaustion before you have to do it all over again. As you stand there in the deafening roar, your mind goes numb. You focus on the task at hand, the simple, repetitive motion that you will perform thousands of times before the day is over. You try not to think about the danger or the pain in your back or the gnawing hunger. You just work because not working is a death sentence in this city. The factory is a monster, and you are its food. It consumes your time, your health, and your spirit, leaving you with just enough life to return the next day. And as the sun begins to set outside the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the factory floor, you realize you're only halfway through your London experience. You still have to survive the river, the diseases, and the night. Let's take a break from the factory floor and talk about the heart of the city, the majestic River Thames. You've seen pictures of it, perhaps a shimmering ribbon of water flowing past the Houses of Parliament. That is a lie, a beautiful postcard hiding a hideous truth. In the mid-19th century, the Thames was not a river. It was an open sewer, a fermenting cesspool of unimaginable filth. For centuries, London had dumped everything into the river. Every cesspit that was emptied, every drain that was laid, all of it eventually found its way to the Thames. By 1850, it was carrying the raw, untreated sewage of over 2 million people. Add to that the industrial waste from factories, tanneries, and slaughterhouses that lined its banks, dumping a toxic cocktail of chemicals, animal carcasses, and putrid effluent into the water. The river was biologically dead, a thick, brown sludge that ebbed and flowed with the tide. You wouldn't see fish, you'd see floating islands of filth, grease, and rotting matter. The smell, especially in the summer, was legendary. It was a complex, gut-wrenching stench of decay and chemicals that could be detected for miles. This culminated in the summer of 1858, an event that went down in history as the Great Stink. An unusually hot summer and low rainfall combined to make the river's condition unbearable. The heat baked the sludge on the riverbanks, and the concentrated sewage began to ferment, releasing waves of nauseating fumes that enveloped the entire city. The smell was so powerful, it was described as a physical force, something you could almost taste. It seeped into every building, from the poorest tenement to the grandest palace. The newly rebuilt Houses of Parliament, right on the riverbank, were particularly affected. Politicians tried to soak the curtains in chloride of lime to mask the smell, but it was useless. Debates were canceled. Committee meetings were abandoned. Members of Parliament were seen fleeing with handkerchiefs pressed to their faces. It was a national crisis, a humiliation for the capital of the world's greatest empire. The Times newspaper declared in a headline, "We can colonize the remotest ends of the earth. We can conquer India. We can pay the interest on the most enormous debt ever contracted. But we cannot clean the River Thames." The irony was that this unbearable stench probably saved London. The prevailing miasma theory of disease meant that everyone believed the foul air itself was deadly. Cholera outbreaks had ravaged the city for decades, and people were terrified that the Great Stink would trigger a plague of apocalyptic proportions. This terror finally spurred Parliament into action, forcing them to fund one of the greatest engineering projects of the 19th century, Joseph Bazalgette's sewer system, a network of intercepting sewers that would capture the waste before it reached the river and carry it far downstream. But as you stand by the river in 1850, that salvation is years away. For you, the Thames is a source of death, not life. The water companies still drew drinking water directly from the filthiest parts of the river and pumped it into people's homes. It was a direct injection of disease into the heart of the community. You watch the mudlarks, impoverished children and old women who scavenged the riverbanks at low tide, wading knee-deep in the toxic sludge, searching for anything of value. A piece of coal, a lost coin, a bit of rope. They are covered head to toe in the river's filth, their skin raw with sores, a living testament to the city's desperation. The great river that had made London a global power was now its greatest threat, a slow-moving monster poisoning the city from within. It was a perfect metaphor for Victorian society itself, a grand, impressive facade hiding a core of rot and decay. And as you breathe in that foul air, you feel a familiar cramp in your stomach. Is it just hunger, or is it the first sign of something far, far worse? That cramp in your stomach brings us to the most terrifying and democratic aspect of Victorian London: disease. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor. Disease was the great equalizer, although the poor certainly provided it with more opportunities to thrive. The city was a perfect incubator, a petri dish for pathogens on a grand scale. The overcrowding, the lack of sanitation, the contaminated water, and the poor nutrition created a paradise for microbes. You live in a constant state of low-level illness. The coughs, the colds, the skin infections, they are just part of the background noise of existence. But the real fear was of the epidemics, the great waves of death that could sweep through the slums like wildfire. And the king of them all was cholera, known as the Blue Death. Cholera is a horrifyingly efficient killer. Transmitted through contaminated water, once it gets you, it acts fast. The symptoms begin with stomach cramps, followed by violent diarrhea and vomiting so severe that a person can lose gallons of fluid in a matter of hours. This rapid dehydration leads to muscle cramps, a drop in body temperature, and the skin taking on a bluish-gray tinge, hence the name. Death can come in less than a day. It's a terrifying and undignified end to a life already filled with hardship. Imagine watching your neighbor Agnes, who was coughing this morning, suddenly struck down, collapsing in agony and wasting away before your eyes, while you can do nothing but watch and pray you are not next. Medical science was largely powerless. The doctors who might attend to you, if you could even afford one, were operating under the miasma theory. They believed the disease was caused by the bad smells from the river and the sewers, so their treatments were focused on fresh air and eliminating odors. They might prescribe useless potions or worse, actively harmful treatments like bloodletting, which only weakened the patient further. It wasn't until Dr. John Snow's groundbreaking work in the 1850s that the truth began to emerge. By meticulously mapping a cholera outbreak in Soho, he traced the source to a single contaminated water pump on Broad Street. When he had the handle removed, the outbreak stopped. It was a revolutionary moment, the birth of modern epidemiology, but it took years for his ideas to be accepted. For now, you're still at the mercy of the pump at the end of your street. Then there was consumption, or tuberculosis, the White Plague. It was a much slower killer, a romanticized wasting disease in novels, but a grim reality of persistent coughing, fever, night sweats, and a gradual fading away. It spread through the air, passed from person to person in the crowded tenements and factories. You breathed it in every day, a lottery of infection. Typhus, another killer, was spread by lice, which were everywhere. Smallpox could leave you scarred for life if it didn't kill you. And for children, the odds were even worse. Measles, scarlet fever, diphtheria, they carried off infants and children in staggering numbers. Many families would have multiple children, knowing that only a fraction would survive to adulthood. Death was not a sanitized event hidden away in a hospital. It happened in your room, next to you. It was a constant public spectacle. Funerals were a common sight, a simple wooden coffin carried through the streets, a brief respite from work for the mourners before they had to return to the grind. The city was a battlefield, and you were an unarmed soldier fighting an invisible enemy every single day. You start to view your own body with suspicion. Is that headache a sign of fever? Is that stomach ache the beginning of cholera? Every bodily sensation is a potential harbinger of doom. The psychological toll is immense, living with that constant, low-level hum of fear. It grinds you down as much as the physical labor and the filth. You are not just fighting for your wages, you are fighting for every single breath, hoping it doesn't carry the microscopic agent of your own destruction. After a 13-hour shift in a hazardous factory, followed by a death-defying commute, you might be looking for a way to unwind, a little leisure to take the edge off your miserable existence. But entertainment in Victorian London is just as grim and desperate as everything else. There are no streaming services, no cozy nights in with a movie. The primary form of escape for the working class was the gin palace. These weren't charming old pubs. They were lavishly decorated establishments with huge mirrors, gaslights, and ornate plasterwork designed to be a dazzling escape from the gray squalor of the streets. And the main attraction was gin, cheap, powerful gin. It was an anesthetic for the masses, a way to temporarily numb the pain, the hunger, and the despair. For a few pennies, you could drink yourself into oblivion, forgetting for a few hours the filth of your home and the hopelessness of your future. The results were devastating. Alcoholism was rampant, leading to debt, violence, and broken families. The artist William Hogarth had captured it a century earlier in his famous print, Gin Lane, a hellscape of drunken parents neglecting their children, and it was a scene that played out every night across the city. It was a brief, fleeting escape that often only deepened the trap of poverty. But perhaps you're looking for something with a bit more of a spectacle. You might be drawn to the blood sports that still persisted in the city's underbelly, illegal dog fights or rat baiting, where a terrier would be thrown into a pit with dozens of rats, and people would bet on how quickly the dog could kill them all. It's a brutal, bloody pastime, a reflection of the casual violence of everyday life. It's entertainment born from a society where life is cheap, both human and animal. And for the ultimate spectacle, there was the public execution. Until the 1860s, hangings were carried out in public, and they were major events, drawing huge crowds. People would pack the streets around the gallows, treating it like a festival. Vendors sold pies and drinks, and the atmosphere was rowdy and morbidly cheerful. You could stand there in the crowd and watch a person take their final, trembling steps up to the scaffold, listen to the final prayer, and then witness the sudden, brutal drop. It was a stark reminder of the state's power and the harshness of the justice system, a form of state-sponsored terror dressed up as public entertainment. If you're looking for something slightly more refined, you might attend a music hall. These were popular venues offering a variety of acts: singers, dancers, comedians, and magicians. It was loud, raucous, and often crude, but it was a genuine form of homegrown entertainment, a place where you could sing along to popular songs and feel a sense of community for a little while. It was one of the few places where you could laugh, but even here, the themes of the songs often revolved around the hardships of life, poverty, and gin. So your options for leisure are to either poison yourself with cheap alcohol, watch animals tear each other apart, witness a state-sanctioned killing, or have a sing-along about how awful your life is. It's a bleak menu of choices, each one reflecting the desperation of the times. There is little joy to be found here, only distraction, a temporary suspension of misery before you have to return to your straw pile in your crowded room and get a few hours of precious sleep before the whole cycle begins again. You are so physically and emotionally exhausted that the idea of fun is an alien concept. Survival is your full-time job and your only hobby. Let's say the constant struggle becomes too much. You get sick, you get injured at the factory, you lose your job. What's your safety net? The answer is simple. There isn't one. There is no unemployment benefit, no social security, no welfare state. There is only the grim, final destination for the destitute, the Victorian workhouse. The workhouse was not designed to be a comfortable refuge. It was designed on a principle called less eligibility. This meant that conditions inside the workhouse had to be intentionally worse than the conditions of the lowest paid independent laborer outside. It was designed to be a deterrent, a place of last resort so feared that people would do anything to avoid it. If you and your family are forced to enter the workhouse, you are separated at the entrance. Husbands go to one section, wives to another, boys and girls to their own separate dormitories. You might not see your spouse or children for weeks, even if you are living under the same roof. Your personal clothes are taken away, and you are given a rough uniform, a visual marker of your poverty and dependence. Your life becomes a monotonous routine of grim labor and silent meals. The work is deliberately tedious and often pointless. You might spend your day picking oakum, which is the painstaking process of teasing apart old tarred ropes, a task that would make your fingers bleed. Or you could be assigned to the stone breaking yard, where you sit in a cell and break rocks into smaller pieces with a hammer. The food is meager and tasteless, typically a rotation of watery gruel, bread and cheese, just enough to keep you alive and working. Silence is often enforced during meals and work, further dehumanizing the experience. The entire system is built to crush your spirit, to make you feel like a failure, a burden on society. It is a prison for the poor. And this is the fear that drives you every single day. The fear of the workhouse is what makes you accept the dangerous factory job, the pitiful wages, the squalid living conditions. Because as terrible as your life is, the alternative is even worse. The threat of the workhouse is the stick that the entire system uses to keep the workforce compliant and desperate. But what about crime? In a city with such vast inequality and poverty, crime is a constant presence. Pickpockets and petty thieves are everywhere, preying on the unwary. The police force, the peelers or bobbies, are a relatively new presence on the streets, established by Sir Robert Peel in 1829. They are often viewed with suspicion by the poor, not as protectors, but as enforcers of the property rights of the wealthy. If you are a victim of a crime, you are unlikely to get much help. But if you are accused of one, the justice system is swift and harsh. Stealing a loaf of bread could get you transported to Australia, sentenced to years of hard labor thousands of miles from home. The courts are biased towards the wealthy, and a poor person stands little chance of a fair trial. So you exist in a precarious balance. You must work tirelessly in dangerous conditions to avoid the workhouse, while navigating a city full of crime and a justice system that is stacked against you. It's a life lived on a knife's edge, where one piece of bad luck, one illness, one accident can send you tumbling into the abyss. There is no safety net below you, only the cold, hard floor of the workhouse. And this constant psychological pressure is as exhausting as any physical labor, a weight on your soul that never lifts. The long day is finally over. The factory bell has rung, releasing you from your 13 hours of servitude. You stumble out into the night, the roar of the machinery still echoing in your ears. The commute home is even more dangerous after dark. The gas lights, which seem so romantic in pictures, are few and far between, concentrated in the wealthier districts. In your part of town, the streets are plunged into an oppressive darkness, broken only by the dim light spilling from the windows of gin palaces. The narrow alleys are full of menacing shadows, and the risk of being robbed or assaulted is very real. You walk quickly, your head down, avoiding eye contact, your senses on high alert, every footstep behind you a potential threat. You are clutching the few pennies you earned today, a treasure that could cost you your life. Finally, you arrive back at your tenement building, a place that offers little comfort, but at least a semblance of shelter. You climb the rickety stairs in the dark, your hand trailing along the grimy wall to guide you. You open the door to your room, and the familiar smell of unwashed bodies and damp greets you like an old enemy. The air is thick with the sounds of sleep, the coughing, the snoring, the whimpering of a hungry child. There is no grand meal waiting for you. You might chew on a piece of dry bread if you have any left, or just drink some more of that questionable water to quiet the hunger in your stomach. You find your spot on the floor, your pile of rags and straw, and you collapse onto it, your body screaming with exhaustion. But sleep doesn't come easily. The floor is hard and cold. The man next to you is drunk and snoring loudly. The baby in the corner is crying. The sounds of the city never truly cease. You can hear shouts and arguments from the street below, the distant rumble of a cart. The factory's rhythm is still inside you, a phantom vibration in your bones. You lie there in the darkness, staring up at a ceiling you cannot see, and the day replays in your mind. The filth of the street, the danger of the factory, the taste of the adulterated food, the ever-present fear of sickness, and the workhouse. You think about the sheer injustice of it all. the vast wealth of the city existing alongside your own profound poverty. You see the fine carriages of the rich passing you on the street, their occupants looking out at you with a mixture of pity and disgust, as if you are a different species entirely. You are living in the heart of a global empire, a city at the forefront of human progress, but none of its benefits ever reach you. You are merely the fuel that the engine of progress consumes, and a cheaply acquired fuel at that. Sleep is not a peaceful rest. It's a brief ceasefire in a war you are losing, a temporary surrender to the exhaustion that will allow you to get up and fight again tomorrow. And as you finally begin to drift off, your last waking thought is a simple one. A prayer that you don't wake up coughing like Agnes. A prayer that the cramps in your stomach are just hunger. A prayer that you have the strength to do this all over again when the sun rises, because you have no other choice. This was life in Victorian London. A relentless grind. A daily confrontation with filth, disease, and despair. It was not an adventure, it was a sentence. And as you fall into a fitful, dreamless sleep, you know that tomorrow morning you will wake up once again in the squalor and the grime of the greatest city in the world.